Hi, everyone. I'm Carli.
And I'm Sophia.
And this is Away She Goes, a podcast from her adventures.
Each episode will help you feed your wanderlust with travel tips, stories, inspiration, and more. Away she goes.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Away She Goes. I'm actually going solo today, and I am interviewing Bianca Riess, who is a pilot, and I'm very excited for this interview. Hi, Bianca. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. So before we get into the deeper stuff in the recording, would you mind just telling our listeners a little bit of background about you and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so I am a flight instructor out in Alaska. I'm originally from Florida. My dad is a pilot with one of the major airlines, and my mom is a flight attendant with that airline. I have two sisters who are pilots as well. So it's kind of an aviation family. And I grew up in Florida, thought I was going to go to law school, did go to law school for a semester, and realized while I love law, being a lawyer wasn't really the lifestyle that I wanted for myself. So I made the switch. It was really hard, but I decided to take a leave of absence from law school and go to flight school. And I learned to fly. I did 7 check rides in 9 months. And once I graduated, it was really hard to get a job because of everything that's happening with the pandemic. So I traveled around, had a great time, learned a lot, but I was really ready to get back in the air. And I went out to Alaska to meet a friend and fly out in the bush. And I met someone who connected me with someone else. And that's how I ended up with my current job, flight instructing out here. So it's been really great. And that's how I ended up where I am.
That's awesome. That's fascinating to me that your whole family is so involved in aviation. So I know, you mentioned you went to law school for a time. Was it always kind of in the back of your mind, even from a young age, the possibility of being a pilot, or had you not really truly considered it until that point in law school where you were kind of having that experience of not feeling like that was the right place for you?
So when I was really young, I had always toyed with the idea just because I saw my dad's career. But my dad had been in the Navy. And at the time, I thought you had to go to the military to become a pilot because airlines prefer, or at least used to prefer, a military experience. So I never knew there was an alternative option. So pretty early on, I kind of neglected that option and decided it just wasn't for me. So that's when I went to law, and I really loved it. And I really do love law still. I actually intend on going back once I'm established with the airlines, just for myself as a personal goal. But yeah, so then it was just law school. And right before I was going to law school, I just started having second thoughts. And I was like, should I even go? I was already accepted. And I was just thinking, it's too late. I'm already accepted to law school. I've already paid for my deposit. I have to go. It's too late. And I'll never forget, I was walking through the mall with my dad one day, and he was talking about my sisters and how they were progressing through their flight training. And I just casually made a comment that, oh, if I had known that you could go the civilian route and do training on your own, I would have been a pilot myself. And he was like, what are you talking about? It's not too late. And I was like, well, yeah, it is. I've already paid for it. I've done pre-law for 4 years of undergrad. I've taken the LSAT. I've worked at law firms. I've done everything for 4 years to set myself up for law school. It's just too late. And he told me, you have no idea how young you are. It's never too late. A lot of people in their 30s, 40s, even 50s make the switch to aviation. So don't worry about that. It's never too late. And if this is something you really want to do, you should do it. So what we decided was, because I decided if I didn't go to law school, I would always wonder what if, or that think I had given up or whatever. So I decided to go for a semester, and he was like, if you love it, then you have your answer. And if you're thinking about aviation still, then you also have your answer. So I went. I loved it. I really did. But I just could not stop thinking about flying. And it just became apparent to me that this is what I need to do. So I went to the dean's office. I got a leave of absence, and I have never looked back once. There's no doubt in my mind that this was the best decision I could have possibly made with my life.
That's great that he was so encouraging.
Yeah.
I feel like some people would expect their parents to be like, no, like stay in school. You're going to school. So
Yeah.
it's really great to hear that he was so encouraging and he was letting you kind of be open to that experience of, maybe law school isn't the place for me to be right now. Maybe this is something I want to pursue. And he was so encouraging and telling you, you can still do this. It's not too late. Because a lot of people definitely feel like it's too late. And I think that's why a lot of people never take the plunge to really do things that they want to do.
Yeah, it can be really intimidating. And that's why it's funny that so like me, myself, and my two sisters are pilots, because my dad's always been so encouraging and supportive of do whatever makes you happy. So he never pressured us to do this. It just is something we all chose.
That's what you all wanted.
Yeah.
So what are the steps that one has to take? I know, you mentioned the military route, which is kind of maybe what people think of and assume needs to happen. But for a civilian, do you need other than going to like flight school, do you need to get, do you have to get a degree in something in particular, an undergrad? Does that help? Or could I graduate with a degree in anything and then go on to flight school and go from there?
So I would say it's dependent on the job that you want within aviation. For the airlines, many of them don't require a degree, but it is preferred. But there are a lot of jobs where you don't need a degree at all. So it just depends what you want to do within aviation and what the training looks like. With that, there are several routes you can do. You can go through a college that has an aviation program, or you can find a privately owned flight school at an airport. But yeah, you'll get a few licenses. And then once you get the commercial license, then you can start being compensated for flying. And with that, there are so many options out there, so many different jobs you can do. I thought in aviation, pretty much the only job is like airline pilot. And that is not the case at all. You can do so many things with a commercial license.
So what steps did you take? Because you obviously went to undergrad and prepped for law school. So what did that look like for you once you decided to make the change?
So since I already had the degree, I chose an accelerated flight training program. That way I could get to the airlines, which is my goal, as quickly as possible. So I did 7 check rides in 9 months. There are a lot of different routes where you don't have to do it that quickly. A lot of people have jobs that they still have to work during, so they can go at their own pace. But for me, what it looked like was I went to this accelerated flight training program. I got my private license, then my instrument rating, then my commercial license, then my multi-engine rating. So that means you can fly aircraft with 2 engines. Then I did my flight instructor license, which is what is allowing me to teach people to fly right now. And then a couple add-ons to that. So I could teach niche parts of aviation. So that's kind of what it would look like. On a day-to-day basis, it would be like I would go to my flight school, you would meet up with your instructor, you might have a brief ground beforehand where you talk about what's going to happen in the flight, and then you get up in the plane and you just fly around, and every lesson's a little different.
So I love flying. A lot of people don't like it. Being a passenger, that is. So I'm always, I'm in addition to being like a travel geek, I'm also an aviation geek. Like one of my friends is also, and we text each other TikToks of different planes and all these, like, we're both just such like aviation nerds. Every time I see a plane, I'm like, where's that going? Like,
Yeah.
I'm that person who will go on like FlightAware and be like, where's that plane going? Where did it come from? Like,
yeah, that's awesome.
That's literally me. So being in the aviation industry, I know at this point, while it's changing, I think it is still a very male dominated industry. So what is that like being a woman in an industry? What percentage of pilots are women? What kind of opportunities are there? And do you see or perceive that there's a difference maybe in your experience versus that of maybe a male counterpart in that industry?
Yeah, so it is incredibly male dominated. It depends on the license or the data that you're looking at, but overall I think it's 4 to 6% of pilots are female. It is not very many at all. And I remember when I started flight training, it was the first time in my life that almost every day I was the only woman in the room. And that was really shocking to me at first, but now I don't even notice it. And the vast majority of male pilots I've met have been so encouraging and supportive. It's incredible. Every once in a while, you'll encounter a really old school pilot where they'll say it's not uncommon to hear things like women shouldn't be flying, and things like that. I know. I roll my
People
eyes.
can't see my face, but I'm making one.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just kind of get used to it. And it's luckily it's not the newer generation of pilots that say things like that. Yeah, it's not uncommon. I've heard a lot of things like that during my time. But again, most pilots are really, really encouraging and supportive of women. But I love it now. I think it's great. Because of that encouragement and support, I don't think I've been discriminated against. If anything, a lot of people are really looking to uplift women and increase that percentage so that there are more female pilots out there. And the female pilot community is incredible. We're all really tight knit. Everyone wants to help each other. So it's my favorite group I've ever been a part of. I felt so welcomed and supported and encouraged, and it's just great.
In addition to those things, what else do you like and dislike about being a pilot?
I really, really, really love the freedom it gives me in every aspect. I mean, the schedule allows me freedom. Being a flight instructor, I make my own schedule. So if I wanted to take off any time, I could. I know every flight school is not like that. I'm really blessed working at Blue River. But also like the flight schedule of an airline pilot. Of course, it takes seniority to build up. The more senior you are, the more freedom and time off you have. But it just feels so free, that schedule, because you're getting in a plane and you're flying it, which you already arguably love doing. And then you're landing in a new city and you're staying in a hotel, you're getting to explore that new city. That doesn't feel like work to me. That's like extreme freedom, and that's super fun. And then also just the feeling of flying, being able to access parts of the country that you wouldn't be able to access otherwise, especially here in Alaska. Most of the state is not on the road system, so you can't see it unless you fly. And that's a really cool thing about Alaska. Owning a plane here is like owning a car. And when I got here, I could not comprehend that, because in other places, it's like if you own a plane, you have a lot of money. Here, it's really accessible. My students would tell me during my first week, "Oh, you should buy a plane." And I was like, "Who do you think I am?" And they're like, "No, it's like owning a car here." And the reason
Wow.
the culture is so different here is because so much of the state is inaccessible by road. So everyone learns to fly so that they can see that beauty. So yeah, there's just incredible freedom in being able to see parts of the country that you couldn't see any other way. And then being able to fly that aircraft yourself, it's just really rewarding. Dislikes, I really have trouble thinking of any,
That's
which is
fine.
crazy.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. And I'm sure there must be some, but I just can't think of any right now. I just love it so much. It's definitely the path that was meant for me.
I mean, this might be a dumb question. Like, is it stressful? Like, I feel like obviously it's something that you're very well trained for, and it's probably, like driving a car. I'm sure it's second nature to you and to
Mhm.
other, but do you ever just sit there and be like, wow, I'm flying a plane? Like, does it ever get stressful? Is it ever something that stresses you out, or you're just so used to it at this point?
I would say I'm used to it. Of course, every flight is different.
Of
There are
course.
so many things you have to take into account. If something goes wrong with the plane itself, or if weather deteriorates, those are instances that could become stressful. I haven't encountered many of those where I've been stressed. I would say flight training would be the more stressful, frustrating part, because that's when you're learning, and it's a lot to learn and you really want to progress, but there could be some things that just aren't clicking at the speed you want them to click at. But I would say I don't find myself stressed often in the air, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. It's Flying is very dynamic, and anything could happen at any given point. So you have to be ready for it. So when things like that happen, that's when stress could come about.
Do you have a favorite route that you fly, or do you have a favorite city or airport that you like to fly into or out of?
Um, I trained in Florida, and Florida's really flat, so there's not much to see with that, but Florida has really crystal clear blue water. So I really loved flying along the coast there. But I would say my favorite place to fly is by far Alaska. I was privileged enough to fly myself and a student through Denali National Park,
Wow.
and it was the one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life. The beauty of Alaska is really endless. I mean, I find myself so many times doing training flights over glaciers, and I just have this moment where I'm like, how did my life take me here? Like, how is this real?
Wow.
um, yeah, it still takes my breath away. I've been here for about 5 or 6 months, and I still have moments where I'm like, I can't believe this is really my life. Um, so yeah, my favorite route, I can't think of a specific route, but just in general, flying through Alaska, anywhere in Alaska, it's always beautiful.
Well, and Alaska and Florida geographically are like opposite places. So it must be so interesting to go from Florida and it being flat and
Yeah.
having this water to Alaska where it's glaciers and it's mountains and it's forests
Yeah.
and such a different landscape. It must be so interesting to have those two things to compare.
It is. And my friend pointed out to me recently, she said, you live closer to Russia than to the rest of the US. And
Yeah.
it's true. I
Yeah.
am located closer to Russia than I am to Seattle. So that's
Wow.
crazy. Yeah. And then also the weather. So we've kind of had a late winter here this year, but now I'm learning to drive on icy runway or icy roads and land on icy and snowy runways. So the experience has been incredible, but yeah, everything's different. The terrain, the weather, like everything. It's the polar opposite of Florida.
And are you in a part of Alaska where, like, as we get into winter, it will be dark most of
Oh
the
yeah.
time? Yeah.
Yeah, right now sun is rising at 9 a.m. and setting at 4 p.m.
Oh God.
Yeah, and
Oof.
it's not even at the worst yet. But
Right.
luckily I live near Anchorage, so it doesn't really get that bad
So
here.
it's not as
When you go,
extreme.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When you go up north, I mean, I was told that the furthest north, there are 90 days of not a single ray of sunshine. Um, so it's really not that bad here. It's definitely different, but also it happens so gradually. When I got here in summer, it was daylight 24/7.
Mhm.
So it's not like it happened overnight. We've been losing, someone told me 6 minutes per day of sunlight. So if I leave for a week and come back, you really notice it.
Mhm.
But day by day, it's harder to notice.
Yeah, I was in Iceland a few years ago in June, so I got to experience the 24/7 daylight and it was just it
Yeah.
was I loved it. It was one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced, but I loved it.
Yeah, I'm like that too. I was concerned about winter because I'm from the Sunshine State. I love
Right. Right.
sunshine, but it's not as bad as I expected. But yeah, I loved over summer when it was daylight 24/7. I just never got tired.
That was my problem when I was in Iceland. I was like, I feel like I should be sleeping. It's like 2 a.m, but I'm ready.
Yeah,
I'm like wide awake. After a few
yeah,
days, it hit me, and I was like, okay, I'm tired now.
yeah.
But yeah, that first few days, I was like, woo, keep going. So you've talked a lot about living in Alaska, and obviously, flying in Alaska looks a lot different than flying in Florida or flying, elsewhere in the US or across the world. Do you find that what you're doing in Alaska might be different because you're in Alaska than it would be if you were somewhere else, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so flight instructing here is going to look pretty similar to flight instructing in the rest of the country, just because we're all training our students to the same standards and for the same check rides. But I would say the big difference is the amount of jobs here, because so much of the state is inaccessible by road. Flying is huge here. So I would say, in my opinion, there are more job opportunities for pilots out here. You can have 500 hours and start flying cargo and passengers. And there are so many jobs out here to do that. And you're going to really remote villages in the tundra. It's unlike anywhere else. And that's the other difference. Pretty much in the rest of the country, there are cities all over. There will be stretches of farmland or open space, but not the way there is in Alaska. So much of the state is untouched. That's why they call it the last frontier. So first of all, yeah, like you said, there's so much more beauty, but also there's so many jobs where you need to bring supplies to these remote villages out in the middle of the tundra. So that would be the main difference. There are a lot of really cool jobs that you don't need that many hours to do, and you'll get great experience doing them.
And I think this makes me just want to, remind our listeners, I think a lot of people forget how huge Alaska is. Like when we see Alaska on a map, it's little and it's next to Hawaii down in the middle of the ocean, like for the purposes of the map of the United States. And Alaska is actually, I think, about 18 to 20% of the size of the entire rest of the continental US. So
yeah,
it's huge.
I had no idea how big it was until I moved here. And if you look at a map and you open up your maps and you look, it is huge.
I'm going to do it right now just so I can see. I know how big it is, but I'm looking anyway.
Yeah, it's like my jaw drops every time I look at it, and I still can't believe how big it is.
Yep. There it is. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you say that about the map, because I have more than one friend who have thought that Alaska was an island because of how it's depicted on a map.
Just next to Hawaii, just out in the ocean somewhere.
Yeah.
It really is just huge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so big. So much of it is untouched. And the license plates say the last frontier. Mm-hmm. It's true. I think it's one of the last places in the world like this where so much of it is untouched.
Yeah. I can't stop looking. I mean, it's
it's
so big.
It's so big. Yeah. And that's why it makes more sense that I'm near Russia, but I just still can't believe that I live closer to Russia than to the rest of my country.
I know. So what are your specific goals in aviation? I know right now you're a flight instructor. Do you want to stay being a flight instructor long-term, or do you want to do other things as well?
So I work at a really, 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 really great flight school. I love my job so much. So I would like to stay as long as possible. It's actually called Blue River Aviation in Palmer, and it's just the best job ever. But that being said, my long-term goal is probably one of the major airlines or major cargo carriers. And in order to work for them, you need 1,500 hours. That's like the magic number in aviation. So the way I build my time to get there, I'm super open to. Like I said, in Alaska, there's so many job opportunities and so much to see and do. And it's almost like, I almost wish I needed more hours than 1,500 so I could do all of it, because there are so many opportunities. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do for the whole 1,500. I love my job and I would like to stay here longer. I also would like to do bush flying out in the tundra. But my long-term goal probably is one of the major airlines. So I'll time build, get to 1,500 and go to one of them. But I'm also very into the idea of seeing where life takes me. So I don't really have set in stone plans. Right. I mean, I thought I would be a lawyer.
Right.
So after that, I stopped making plans. And the story of how I got here was very fast. I never thought I'd be living in Alaska. But after interviewing 2 weeks later, I had sold my car in Florida. I had bought a car in Seattle sight unseen, and I drove myself alone. Yep. Through Canada. So yeah, I don't make plans anymore, but the end goal would be a major airline as of now.
That's awesome. And I'm somebody, I very like fly by the seat of my pants sometimes too. So I am all for like not having plans. I love not having plans.
Yeah. That's when all the really cool stuff happens.
Somewhere right now, my mother has like an uncomfortable tingling feeling and she doesn't know why, but that's because she has everything planned out like 2 years in advance.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends like that. My best friend in the world, she's like that. And us traveling together is so funny because we are polar opposites.
Yeah. When I choose where I'm going to go, it's usually very impulsive. Once I decide on a place, I plan some what I'm going to do, but I'm known for like seeing sales on my Facebook page and like buying flights to someplace right then and
Yeah.
there that I had no
Yeah.
intention of doing. But
Oh, that's the best way to
yeah.
travel.
Oh yeah, that was how I ended up in Iceland. It was like Iceland Air is having a sale, and I was like, okay, guess I'm going to
That's
Iceland
awesome.
now. Yeah. So something I'm really curious about, and I'm sure some of our listeners are, especially given where it is that you live and work, like what are some of the coolest things that you've seen from in the air?
So I have seen some really, really cool things. Just wildlife alone. I've seen seals, muskox, moose, wolves. God, and there are so many more. Deer, caribou. There have been so many cool things. So the wildlife alone has been really awesome. The terrain has been awesome. Like I said, I've seen Denali. I've flown over glaciers, mountain ranges. I've flown through or near the Bering Sea. So that's been really cool. And then just the villages. I had the amazing opportunity to fly a few times out in the tundra in Southwest Alaska. And I've been able to land at villages on these dirt gravel strips and meet just the most amazing people and seen the most amazing culture. And so in Alaska, those have been the coolest things I've seen. In Florida, I've seen dolphins in the ocean. I've seen like the most turquoise, clear blue water you could imagine. I was flying through Florida and I saw a rainbow from end to end in the cabin. Yeah, it was so beautiful. There have just been endless, incredible views all around the country. I mean, anywhere you fly, not just Alaska, you're going to see some really, really cool things.
Just this is just me out of curiosity. What I'm sure there's a range. I'm sure it's different. Like what altitudes are you flying at typically when you're doing these flights that you do? This is just me being curious.
Yeah. So I'm really lucky to be flying a multi-engine aircraft. So that has two engines on each side. And with that, you can fly a lot higher, and you probably should because it goes so fast. So I usually do training flights at about anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 feet. In a smaller plane in Alaska, you're probably more like 2,000 or 3,000 feet. I have flown as high as 10,000 feet. So that's been cool, but that's not the norm. That's not the day to day.
Right. I was just wondering because obviously my frame of reference is a commercial flight where you're, 36,000 feet up. And I'm like, you definitely can't see wildlife. And
oh yeah.
So I was just wondering, I was just trying to get a frame of reference for how high up you were to be able to see stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah. You can fly legally as low as 500 feet. And I've done that. I flew on a check ride with an examiner in Florida, 500 feet above the water of the ocean. And that was really, really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So before we wrap up, do you have any advice if we have any listeners who are maybe thinking about taking the step to enrolling in flight school or maybe curious about becoming a pilot? Do you have any words of wisdom, any advice for anybody who might want to do that?
My first advice is a very enthusiastic, do it. Just do it. Go for it. Don't, because I had so many second thoughts. I thought I was trapped. I thought I was stuck and that I had to go to law school because I had invested so much time and money into it. Don't let any of those concerns limit you. Just do it. Once you've done it and once you're in it, my advice is don't give up because flight training can be really hard. Some days harder than others. And you just have to continue because it's so rewarding. You're going to learn so much. It's going to challenge you. You're going to learn a lot about yourself, but it is so worth it. And it's an incredible journey. My other advice is don't be scared to reach out to people. There are so many resources in aviation. There's so many, if you're a minority in aviation, a woman in aviation, there are so many people that want to help you and that want to launch your career and help you do that. So reach out to people. Everyone, I'll DM strangers on social media platforms and reach out, and everyone is so enthusiastic to help you. So if you're feeling like you're not understanding something or it's just hard, reach out to someone. There's so many people that want to help, including me. Anyone can reach out to me. And if you have personal questions about it or intricate questions about it, please reach out to me. I love helping people get into aviation. But yeah, just don't give up and don't let your fears hold you back. It's the best decision I've ever made. So yeah, very enthusiastic, do it.
And where can our listeners find you on social media or on the internet? If they do want to reach out to you, if they want to follow you and see your kind of day-to-day life, where can we find you?
So my Instagram handle is Bianca, that's Bianca. There's an additional A, and then Riess, my last name, Riess. And you can also just search my name, Bianca Riess, Riess. And same with Facebook, just my name, Bianca Riess.
All right. Thank you everybody so much for listening. And thank you, Bianca, for coming on. This was one of my favorite episodes that we've recorded because I'm such an aviation geek also. So I'm like, this is just so fascinating. I'm like sitting here eating up everything that you're saying.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on and for sharing your stories and your anecdotes with us. And we will see everybody in 2 weeks. Bye. That's all for this episode. If you'd like more Away She Goes in your life, make sure to stop by heradventures.com/podcast. That's where you can fill out a form if you're interested in being a guest on the show. And you can also write to us at awayshegosgwt@gmail.com or leave us a message on our Google voicemail from any phone or computer at 1-563-503-6323. To follow our adventures, you can follow me on Instagram at Carli Sees the World. Carli is spelled Carli.
You can also follow me at Sophia AEZ. Sophia is spelled Sophia. Away She Goes is part of Her Adventures, a community dedicated to radically redefining travel to be inclusive, sustainable, and empowering. You can learn more about Her Adventures, find travel tips and support, shop travel-themed items made by our members, and join our Facebook group with nearly 100,000 women all around the world. All at heradventures.com. We can't wait to connect and explore with you. Away she goes.